Thank you so much, Terrence. Now I know why I'm partially broke by Starbucks. Think hopefully Neiman Marcus does not catch on to that either. Anyway, so we're going to welcome on Josh Fletcher up as our next speaker. And Shaji has asked me for any of the angel investors that are here to please go and meet him outside in the corridor for the startup pitch at 10:30. And for the women in tech, that's going to begin at 11 in the pavilion. Josh? All right. Well, is Josh here? I just put him on the mic. I can stand up here and tap dance for you. So is everybody enjoying this so far? Okay, raise of hand. How many in here are from DC? Or not from DC? Nobody's from DC. How many in here live in the DMV? Okay. How many of you all here are from the West Coast that came out to this today? Well, that's awesome. Yay, stand up and clap for them. Woo! So y'all brought the sunshine then. Oh, Canada. I love Canada. It's fun to go shopping there for the exchange. Sorry. Is Josh here? I can text him. Well, if you have time and you are here for a few days, I would highly recommend going to visit the Renwick Gallery. It's a wonderful art museum. It's personally one of my favorites, and it's right behind the White House. They have a new installation that's in there. And then there's actually a new digital art museum that's right around the corner called Architect. So go check that out if you get a chance.
Hey everybody, thank you so much for coming out. Actually came over from Los Angeles, and I want to dive into a little bit of a backstory of how I got here. So a while back ago, I was actually very into tech. I had just completed a programming boot camp, and I wanted to change the world. Now, what ended up happening is I had a meeting with Scott Case, who at the time was my mentor. He's also better known as the co-founder of Priceline. And he looked at this company I was working for, and I was a VP of marketing for them, and it was my first week. And he says, your mobile app sucks, the company is going to fail, and the API you're using for login credentials is going to be taken away by LinkedIn because I'm really good friends with the co-founders, and I just know that. And I was like, wow, it's my first week at this job. That's pretty rough. So company failed 4 months later. And then I was up in Silicon Valley, and what do all these companies have in common? Well, at the time, I had interviewed with all of them on their early teams, and now they're all worth over $100 million. The bad news, I didn't get a job at any of these companies. So, great companies. You probably know a couple of them, Grammarly, Marketo, huge companies today. Some of these companies are on track to be worth $1 billion. Now, what ended up happening is I lost all my money because I was interviewing at these companies, and none of them were hiring me. So what I did is I went back to San Diego, where my family's from, ended up moving in with my dad, and I said, what can I do to change my life? So I was looking at the last couple years of working in startups and saying, do I still want to go down this route? And I said, why not? But I just got to figure it out. So what I did is I started reading books. And what I like to say is that desperation breeds potential. So when you're desperate, you're likely to change, right? You'll take anything. So for me, I had no money, so I just started reading tons of books, and I ended up reading 170 books over the span of the next year on neuroscience, psychology, and business. And it made me take a very different view of social media, marketing, as well as building a growth culture. So what's really interesting is that over this time when I was reading, I started to notice this trend of what I like to call creating over consuming. And here are some of the books that I read. And this was just a really interesting period of my life because all I did was read and write. And then I came up with an idea. Who are the best marketers? Now, when we think of marketers, maybe you guys think of people like Seth Godin, people like Neil Patel, the people that have all the blogs that have tons and tons of traffic. What I learned is that marketing existed before social media even existed, right? So when I think of marketers, I think of people like Martin Luther King. I think of people like Gandhi, right? People who created the largest movements before social media even existed. So I started studying these people, and I said, what did they do differently? And what I found out is that they spent 99% of their time creating value. Now I asked, why is it so much harder to create value today? So if you go on the internet, and let's say you go to LinkedIn, you go to your newsfeed, or you go to Facebook, and you want to create some value for people. You have this status, whatever it is that you want to type out. Now, what's on the side, left-hand side, the right-hand side, underneath it? Ads, other people's content. It's almost impossible to concentrate and focus. So you're almost getting pushed to consume every time you're trying to create. Now, if I were to write a letter 30 years ago, I could sit down on my desk and just write a letter, right? There wouldn't be ads getting shoved in my face telling me to consume. So I asked, how can I get rid of all of these distractions? And it started with this simple idea that if I want to do this, I'm going to document everything. And what this ended up turning into is 3 of the top 10 marketing books in the last year of how I was able to do this. And when the result of it is close to 1 billion views that my team was able to get for whether it be influencers, viral content across Facebook, LinkedIn, Quora, and YouTube. And it just had to do with this simple notion that we're not going to concentrate on anything else on the web except creation. And what I realized, especially after reading all those books and having a company take a chance on me, and it was a Facebook marketing software company. They're the first company to do live streaming on Facebook. And these people paid no attention to the entire rest of the world. All they said is, what can we do with this simple status area? Right? The simple status area on Facebook. And that's how they came up with live streaming, right? And when you're looking at other people's content and when you're following everybody else, you're always going to be one step behind. What I like to say is the innovators, they have blindfolds on, right? As much as we want to think that they learn from others, many people don't remember, but Albert Einstein, when he was visiting the there's this famous story of it was his turn to speak, and then they found him out in the garden just staring at some flowers, right? And he's just staring there, totally in space. And they had to go and get him, right? And he just has these blindfolds on, not paying attention to what anybody else is doing. And so I said, what if we put those blindfolds on? What could we create? So this is what I did. I basically created a Chrome extension that blocked out everything, blocked out all ads, all content from other people, and gave me just one little area. And I said, what can I do with this area? Can I really change a platform just looking at this simple status area? And the answer was yes. So when I wanted to change a platform, I realized that there's some actions that I can no longer take, right? I can't interact with anybody else's content. I'm no longer liking other people's content. I'm no longer commenting on it. And the result of that was I started publishing stuff that was very original, that I didn't even know was original. And I eventually became the originator of long-form story content and statuses on LinkedIn, which today is very popular. And when I had sort of, I guess, invented it, it just took off. And over the span of 6 months, I was able to get close to 200 million views. And if you ask yourself, how many people view the status area every single month? Maybe it's like 100 million people, right? Because I think there's over 300 million active users on LinkedIn, so you have tons of people viewing this area. And not one of them said, what if we just wrote a story here? What if we stopped publishing on LinkedIn Pulse? And the only way that I was able to do that is just cutting out everything else, right? And not thinking in terms of what people were already publishing, right? So if you went to your feed, you would see someone promoting an event, someone promoting a blog post. So your idea would be, how can I promote my blog post better? My idea was, hey, this is a status area. What can I put here? And by not looking at anybody else's content, I said, why not a story, right? It's so simple. And LinkedIn has been around for a very long time. And in the last year, it has changed dramatically. And what I mean by that is now it has 60% more content uploaded in the last year than the year before, which is just incredible growth for a social platform. And one of the things that I realized by not liking and commenting on other people's posts is that real conversations and real value online comes through messaging and conversation, right? Me reaching out to another individual and just asking them, hey, do you have 15 minutes to talk? Hey, I noticed you do X and Y. I'd love to speak with you more, right? So everybody wants to get noticed, but let's say you're on Instagram and you're the 100th like on someone else's post, and you're thinking to yourself, oh, they're definitely going to notice me, right? They're not going to notice you. And this is the problem with today's culture, is that they don't understand how to build relationships online. It's a huge, huge problem. They don't understand that for every time you like a post, you're actually not getting any value out of it. They don't even understand how to message people. You may have 3,000 Facebook friends, but how many have you actually messaged in the last month? 3, 4, right? Does it even ever change the people? Probably not. And now what I've come to realize is that even with Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, it's not like we're more connected because people actually don't know how to use these tools to connect with each other. They don't know how to use these tools to tell their stories. So stop liking other people's content and start messaging them. This is where the real value comes into play. Today, I can message 100 people through my connection base and have 100 real conversations, but most people, what they're going to do is scroll through their newsfeed and look at what everybody else is producing rather than actually talk to them about it. And I did the same thing with Facebook. And it's so interesting. Like, I'm not a coder. I went to a coding boot camp a long time ago, and that was also when I realized I never wanted to code again. So I just outsourced all my code since. And it's funny, people think I'm like the best coder in the world. Like, how do you come up with all these tools? And I just use sites like Freelancer, Upwork, and you just pay a couple $100s and you can transform a whole experience for you online. And my experience was a blank canvas. So I wanted to be an artist on these platforms and see what that would allow me to create. So I started publishing stories on Facebook as well. And what I noticed is that I could go through every single platform and innovate and teach people how you can actually build relationships. So a couple of things that I did is I started investing in compounding skills. And what do I mean by this? So let's say I'm a writer today. If I invest in writing today, and I'm going to be a writer for the next 60 years of my life, I have 59 years of benefit, right? Now, if I invest in coding today in Swift, that's the language that I'm learning, right? Is Swift going to even be popular in like 3 years? Probably not. So even though coding is a great skill, is it a compounding skill? Is it going to give you value over time? The chances are it's probably no. Sales is a great skill. That will be with you for the rest of the time, right? So while I started writing and creating these stories and started creating relationships, I started realizing the value of what I was doing because it had this huge compounding effect. And one relationship turned into 2, 3, and then all of a sudden today, I run the largest community online for marketers and founders. We have over 18,000 members. And it's all because I just switched my mentality from consuming to creating. So again, writing is one of the huge and one of the most compounding skills. Same with sales, same with playing music. You probably can think of a number off the top of your head, right? And if you start early and you know that's going to be a skill that you're going to continue to invest in for the next 20 years, imagine how valuable that is to you today. So what I like to say is that a lot of people will chase, let's say, cryptocurrency, and they're investing in Bitcoin, they're investing in all these areas. And I laugh at that because nobody even knows if Bitcoin's going to be here in 10 years. And I know writing is going to be here for the next 60 years. I know sales is going to be here for the next 60 years. So if I invest in these skills and how to use them on social platforms, then I have far more benefit than if I were to invest all my money in cryptocurrency. So what I like to say is you have to care less. And what do I mean by this? So when you're online, you're looking at what everybody else is doing, right? And it's almost like this peer pressure. I have to be the same. And you want to fit in. But what if I told you that everybody, almost everybody, is using online social platforms in the wrong way? Now, what's going to happen is you start producing content, you start doing your own thing, and people don't get it at first. Maybe they complain. So when I started writing on LinkedIn, writing these stories, I would say half the comments were negative. People were just bashing me. They're like, keep this to Facebook. And to me, I was like, you know, these posts are getting like 1 million views per post. Like, I'm not going to keep this to Facebook. That's crazy. And I don't care if half the comments are negative. You know, we're trying to change how you guys think. And eventually, they just gave up. And now all the comments are positive, right? But that's what happens when you're the first to innovate on another platform. There's never this overwhelming positive response. It's like, wow, thank you so much for doing this. People usually hate you at first, and then they get used to it. And the only reason that I feel like I was able to do this, well, one of the primary reasons, is that I care less about what other people think about me. And as your social presence grows, like I think I reach around 3 to 5 million of people a week now with my content, you're going to get a lot of haters that come at you. And I realized, I was like, wow, nobody wants to have this job. Like, nobody wants to have, 500 negative comments about them a week. No wonder nobody's an influencer. And that's probably the hardest thing to deal with it. So the sooner you care less about what other people think, and the sooner you put your blindfolds on, the faster it is that you can innovate. So this is my version of caring less. Like, set the fire, watch it explode, and walk away. So one of our most valued assets is time, right? And compounding assets and compounding skills are so important to invest in because time is all we have. And if you're caring about what other people think, it prevents you from being original, right? Because then you're giving weight to their opinions. And as much as we like to say, listen to others, be respectful of their opinions, when you have an online social platforms like Quora, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, expanding so fast technology and changing every day, everybody's opinions on these platforms hold very little weight. And sometimes you have to realize that you don't have the time to care about them, because if you do care about them, you're not going to make any progression. And that was one of my big realizations, is when I started caring about everything that people were telling me to do, I started wasting all this time and nothing. I was stopped innovating. And I was like, you have to draw a hard line, right? So I said, okay, I'm just going to take a bet that most people don't know how to use these social platforms and see if I win. And I won. So what I like to say, if you're going to have this mentality, it's important to be kind and laugh more. Because you're going to get a lot of hate that comes at you if you're trying to innovate on social platforms. A ton of hate. And unless you're very lighthearted and you could take things for a grain of salt, you will feel like these people are destroying you online. And I think it's one of the problems with our culture as well. Like, you see a lot of kids who all of a sudden become internet famous and they become really depressed. And it's not like this correlation where internet famous, happy life, right? That's what most people think. It's actually the exact opposite. Because what do these kids deal with? You're 16 years old, you have 5 million YouTube subscribers, and you have thousands of people telling you to die every day, right? It doesn't sound very pleasant, especially if you're that young. You know, you're very sensitive to this type of stuff. So what I found out is that you have to have a very high EQ in order to deal with this, right? So for many youngsters, and I like to say many people getting into social media, it's important for them to be self-aware. If you're not self-aware, you can't survive on these platforms. So Obama's my favorite example, just because I think he can make anybody smile or laugh. So yeah. And then have an abundant mindset. I'm a big Obama fan. So having an abundant mindset is so important. So what I've realized is that because you're investing in compound skills, compound assets, is you won't always see the benefit right away. So one of the things people know me for is they're like, how do you write so much content? Why do you put out so much of it for free? And I tell them, like, well, I know it's going to compound, and I won't know if I'm really changing a social platform until 2-3 months down the line, right? And nobody's going to tell you day one, oh, wow, you wrote this post, and it blew up, and you have changed an entire social platform. That just doesn't happen, right? You have to figure out if it works, if there's a novelty effect. And I'll give you an example. So I run one of the most active Facebook communities, and I was live streaming my Facebook community for a month. People loved it for an entire month. Then all of a sudden, the views dropped to a third. And I asked myself, you know, why did that happen? Like, I was doing it consistently every single day, and for 30 days, they love this content. The stats are there. I have to keep doing it, right? And then it hit me, there's a novelty effect, right? So you have to get past the novelty effect. And that novelty effect can last for a very long time, especially on social platforms where people aren't used to different types of content, right? So you probably, if you have someone in your Facebook friend network that live streams all the time, and there's probably a moment where you're like, wow, this guy's super cool. And then 30 days later, you're like, man, this guy's getting really annoying. Like, I just got to turn this off. So that was me. But you figure that out along the way, but it's only if you're consistent, right? So as I like to say, you know, sometimes it takes 1,000 tries, right? Maybe even more. And you're doing it for an extended period. Like, I didn't really know that I was changing LinkedIn until several months in. And I was like, wow, people started reaching out to me, and they said, you're doing something that I've never seen before. And LinkedIn's a pretty big place. I don't look at everybody's content, so I wouldn't even know, right? And people were saying, you can't be writing these statuses. Like, they just wouldn't even accept that it was possible, right? And then it became possible. So what I like to do is whenever you're jumping onto a new platform is to set very high expectations and over-deliver. And you're looking at a blank canvas, right? You're looking at your Facebook status area, your LinkedIn status area, or maybe it's Quora. And your job is not to just get marginal gains, right? If the average post in newsfeed gets 10 engagements, you can't say, I got 15, and I really changed how people think about this platform. You have to go from 10 to 1,000, right? So that's what I look for. I'm like, how can I go from 10 to 1,000? And I'm going to test as much content as possible until I can make that big of a jump. So this is the group that I run, and we have chapters all over the world. And what's interesting about this group, when I created it, there were no other great Facebook groups. So there might have been maybe 2 or 3, and I had no example to go off of how to run a community on Facebook. So what I did, I just turned on my blinders, and I went back to a lot of the books I read about neuroscience, how to create basically an addiction to whatever you're creating, right? So for me, that was this Facebook group, and I said, how can I make mine different? Now, every Facebook group is run as more of a support community where you can put questions in there. I don't allow any questions in my community, 0. Reason for that is when someone sees a notification, they know it's going to be a how-to guide, something of the highest value, and it creates this addictive loop, right? And that little notion that seems so simple, especially if you read a book called Hooked by Nir Eyal, a really popular book, I suggest you check it out. He talks about creating this addictive loop. And just by doing that, I reinvented Facebook groups, right? And it was actually so cool that Mark Zuckerberg invited me to the Facebook Community Summit when they changed their mission. And it wasn't even that complex, right? I'm not even doing anything like going to the moon. I'm just saying, hey, this notification, what if I just made it more high value? And now I have one of the most active Facebook groups. It's incredible. And then I was like, okay, if I can do it with Facebook, let me try it with Quora. And then I was one of the early Quora users, and I noticed that most people at the time had around 20,000 followers that were considered influencers. And I looked at what they did, and I said, you know, what are they doing that really works? And I couldn't really find anything. So I said, okay, well, let's do what you do best. Put your blindfolds on and start just testing out different types of content on questions. And then after a couple months, I figured it out. I was telling very personal stories to answers that people normally, to questions that people normally answer in a very like how-to manner, right? But personal stories would outperform those by sometimes 100x, sometimes 1,000x. And all of a sudden, I became one of the fastest growing profiles on all of Quora. And that happened in a span of 3 months, just putting blindfolds on and testing different pieces of content. And again, I'm not paying for any of this, right? This is all free. I'm just testing. And rather than saying, this is what the norm is, and I'm going to go pursue the norm and compete with the norm, I'm just going to figure out what works better, right? So this is my LinkedIn profile. And it's actually, this is a screenshot from Reuters, which covered it. So they did a whole TV segment on me and interviewed some people at LinkedIn who couldn't comment on anything. But so it's really funny if you guys have time to check it out. And there was some other coverage in BuzzFeed, too, which is pretty hilarious. So they talked about how people are reinventing LinkedIn. And again, a platform that has millions and millions of users, and the one thing that's common among all of them is they see this status area every day. And after, I don't know how long the platform has been around, but let's say 10 years, after 10 years, someone writes stories in the status area. So people are reinventing social platforms still today in the most crazy manner that nobody's ever seen with the simplest of things. And people are trying to make it far more complex, right? And it's not true. It's just very simple questions we have to ask ourselves, and then we just have to answer them. So this is a funny case study. So many of you guys may know Ollie B. He had a video go viral, over 100 million views. So my team helped him do this. And what we realized is that virality is a very systemic process, that it's not just guess and throw something out there. We realized that writing and video content can actually be broken down into a formula. So how did we do this? And how are people doing this across Facebook and thousands of them every day to get videos to go viral? So what we did is we took a video of him, and it was actually played off another video that went viral of someone in an Uber car sitting in the front seat rapping. And that video went viral, so we're like, okay, Ollie, what if we dressed you up in a nerdy costume and did the same video, right? Just a little tweak. And that's all it took, right? We just add one variable to something that already works. And not only did he get 100 million views on this video, he got 300,000 more fans on Facebook, as well as 50,000 fans on YouTube, right? And then you could do it across the board. And we've done this across the board for tons and tons of people. And people think it's very hard to go viral, and it's not true at all. Most influencers that you see today are actually pulling content that's gone viral maybe 5 years ago, 6 years ago, and just copying it and adding their own tweak. And what I've come to realize is not only is there a systematic process to go viral, but you can do this almost as much as you want. I mean, it's crazy, right? But nobody is. Very few. The only people that really get it are the people that understand how different platforms work. For example, if I take a viral video, motivational video from Facebook and put it on LinkedIn, it'll probably pop. People don't change their consumption habits of content across platforms. It's actually an entire myth. And LinkedIn likes to have its own brand. Quora likes to pretend like it has its own brand. But if I take the same piece of content from Quora, post it on Facebook, post it on LinkedIn, and post it as an Instagram description, it'll actually make all those pieces of content pop, as long as the original piece was really good, right? And most people don't think about it that way. But that's how I actually did it. So for the first couple of months on LinkedIn, I just reposted content. I had 500 pieces to repost. It was the easiest way to rack up 200 million views. So what I like to say is you got to take a leap, right? It's not easy. It's taking a leap of faith and saying, hey, if I put blinders on and just try to do something different, can I really change the world, right? And even though these seem like small changes, you're talking about platforms that have hundreds of millions of people. So today, after Facebook changed their mission and put more emphasis on groups and gave them analytics, gave them the ability to really dive into their members and reach their members with surveys, now you have tons of people starting groups, right? And now that you have people storytelling on LinkedIn, you have 60% more content uploaded this year than last year. And Quora is becoming ever more popular as well. And all because of very simple questions that are being asked. Oh, and that's everything, guys. So thank you so much. I appreciate it. If you have any questions about it, please let me know. Again, the most innovative steps we can take are right in front of us. Just ask yourself the right questions. Cheers.